Okay, we'll call this regular well, it's not an afternoon meeting, but it's a regular meeting, soon to be afternoon. It's 11 a.m. Meeting of Council. Call it to order, and I would like a motion, please, to adopt the agenda for this meeting. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Kunst. Question about the agenda. Please go ahead, Councillor Richter.
Thank you. I notice that there's times on this agenda, and where we've never done that before, my question is, what is the intent of those times? Is the intent to limit the discussion period in any way, shape, or form to adhering to those timelines?
Mr. Buck.
The timelines are there to provide merely guidelines. We cannot limit the debate in the procedural bylaw. I guess in theory we could, but that's not the intent. It would require a bylaw amendment to do so. The real purpose behind these is to provide some historical averages as to how much time it's taken on the various components. So we've done a bit of an analysis, and the clerk's office actually came up with the times you have in terms of the period of time that's there. And our primary motivation is when the public is asking us, we can start to refer them to the historical timelines that we have, but making sure that they're aware that these are not binding on council, but they're merely guidelines and illustrative as to the timelines we've been experiencing historically.
Okay, so there's no way anybody who's running the meeting is going to say, oops, we're at 11:05 now, time to cut debate off. That won't happen.
They can't do that.
30 seconds.
Motion to council.
See, that's what I'm worried about.
But it could serve as a reminder in terms of the amount of time the council has spent on the issue, but that's all. Council has to be able to debate it till they're bringing it to a conclusion. Okay.
All right, so because otherwise I would say we should adopt the agenda and remove the timelines. Well,
I wonder if we couldn't put in parentheses approximate in there, which would maybe solve it for everyone, because really it will be approximate, because we can't be, as well as I run a meeting, I can't see that I can meet that by every second there.
We can try that. The reason it appears on that line is because of the limitations of the computer software. The formats or the tables are fairly rigid, and we've tried to actually insert more information in the tables than traditionally.
I'm wondering, do other councils do this as well?
It's sporadic across the province. Some do. Some meetings require it. We're thinking this might be helpful to council as going forward, as we're spending more times in meetings and we are sensitive to the start time, and we're having the afternoon meeting starting this morning. Again, though, there is illustrations, guidelines in terms of what can be done. I think at some point we're going to have to revisit the issue of additional meeting dates just because of some of the public input we're receiving.
Yeah, well, I think the issue is we've got too much on the agendas and we need to go to a third meeting, so I would agree with revisiting.
Okay, well, in terms of approving the agenda, can we do it with a proviso that these times are approximate? Councillor Richter, would that be appropriate?
I would make that amendment then.
Okay, so then is everyone in agreement with that? Unanimous consent then that the agenda be approved with the times indicated as to be approximate. Any more discussion on approval of the agenda? All in favor?
No.
Oh, okay. Pardon me. Councillor Davis?
Hi. Hello? Well, actually, I don't need it. Sorry I was late. I didn't quite hear the intent of through the chair to Mr. Backham. I am concerned because at the Langley Sustainable Agriculture Foundation, Carol Paulson puts the letters on, or the time, and it's never right. It never, and I sit there and I kind of get an anticipation. It's been 4 minutes now. What are we doing here? In my own mind, and I'm just concerned. Also, I think I heard the brief. Could this be interpreted 6 months down the road, or a year down the road, that, okay, we got the times here, we're way off our times. That's what I'm concerned about, because everyone has their say and all that sort of stuff. So I guess the question is, why are these times here? Whose idea was this?
In reverse order, To actually make any times mandatory would require an amendment to the procedural bylaw, and there's been no such amendment suggested. These times are illustrative in terms of trying to actually go from some historical times we've experienced in terms of how long it's taking to do things. So it helps us somewhat frame the agenda, and as we see the times creep up, it's more difficult. The other challenge it does, that is, it could be construed as being guidelines, I guess, or references. Hence, the amendment is to make it approximate, so we're aware of what it looks like in terms of how people review it, so they know these are approximate timelines. And the concept came from the clerk's office and myself as to trying to give more information to council as to how we could advance the meetings in a more orderly fashion. But they cannot limit debate. The only process, and this is even debatable, would be if there was to be some procedural bylaw amendments.
Yeah, okay.
None of that's being proposed, and we did insert the word approximately on the motion.
Will we have to say approximately every meeting?
We'd have to if we're going to be consistent, yes.
So in other words, this.
No, but we don't want to do that.
But the next printed agenda, Councillor Davis, would probably have the words approximate in parentheses next to these times.
The numbers
for the public
over time could change because remember these represent historical averages. So if all of a sudden council was processing some matters much more quickly, we'd continue to monitor the averages and that would bring those averages down.
And in fairness, we have been discussing for quite a while the efficiencies of our meetings. So I think this is staff's efforts to try and help us in that respect.
Okay, but coming from the chair, you're pointing that in a direction of this is going to be what we're going to be doing in the next 6 months. Yeah, that's the way I took it.
Well,
it's just really hard to, everyone's got their own idea, and to shut me up, I'm long-winded, and I sometimes want to say something, and that's why if somebody else gets long-winded too, which never happens, it's just me, I'm concerned that this may morph into something.
To morph into something would require a bylaw amendment, so that's the missing step. To do that would require further debate and direction from council.
And there's no indication that we're doing that.
Well, you just said that, Councillor or Mayor, Acting Mayor Bob. You just said that. You just said that.
I said these are approximate times that staff have put in to try and help us out, and there's no procedural requirement to stick to them, but it does help us to guide the meeting. And more important,
I'm not saying it's. I'm not. I think it's actually maybe a good. You try to herd a cows, and you got a certain protocol, but this is okay. So, but I guess my concern is, it's going to be so that it's going to be approximate now. So the next agenda in 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks, it'll have the numbers on there, but it'll always be
approximate.
Yeah, now, if council wishes, we could make this a motion so that you can vote accordingly. Or we did take a unanimous consent to have.
Well, no, I
Are you okay with that, or do you want a motion? Because we could do that too.
No, unanimous consent is okay, but right. I'm sorry I was late. I didn't get the whole gist of it, so I just wanted to air my concerns.
And I would say to council's comfort that every time we approve the agenda, these times will be there, and we can debate it again next time because we're out of time now.
Well, the good news is
okay.
No, the good news is to demonstrate the I guess veracity of them. The thought was 11:03, and now we're at 11:07 already, so we're 11:09. So
get on with it.
All right. So all in favor?
There is, Your Worship. There is a delegation to add or discuss.
Is that in the agenda part now? I thought it came under delegations. Okay, so we would do it now. We'd add it to
because it's on the agenda. It gets a bit technical.
Right.
We're adding a sixth party to the agenda.
I understand, but that has to be. Sorry, Mr. Backett. So in other words, we're voting on that before we approve the agenda. Is that what I'm hearing?
But it would probably be prudent in this circumstance because it's the sixth delegation.
All right, then. So we're holding on the vote. We're holding on the vote on the agenda, even though we've had the discussion about the addition of these times, and now we're going to debate the additional delegation. So we would need a motion, first of all, to receive this extra delegation, which is because it is the sixth, and our policy only allows 5. We're not debating the validity of the delegation because it does cover the policy in that the item is on the agenda already.
Correct.
Okay, and we'll need a two-thirds majority to approve it. Well, okay. Yeah, all right. My apologies. Okay, I'm just saying that, okay, let me word this correctly. We are needing to take a vote because it's the 6th. we don't have to take a vote that it be added to the agenda when it was not already on the agenda.
Correct.
It's not actually late. It was sent in time. Okay, Councillor Richter?
Yes.
We need to take a two-thirds vote. You can debate it any which way you like. My apologies for saying different a minute ago. But it does require 6 of us to approve the delegation, not because it's late and not because it doesn't pertain to the agenda, but because it's the 6th one, and we only allow 5. So we'll need a motion to put this as the 6th. Are you moving that, Councillor Woodward? No. Do we need a motion before we can debate it? Motion to allow this delegation? No? Sure. Okay, there's one. Councillor Kunst, Councillor Ferguson. So now it's on the floor for debate. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, just a question to the chair of the staff. Can I get a definition of late delegation? What defines a late delegation request?
We actually don't really have late delegation requests according to the bylaw at this point. If an item is not on the agenda, it would be pushed to the next agenda. So if someone applied on a Thursday after the agenda had been published, they would be directed to go to the following meeting. In this case, the item is related to something that was already published on the agenda, so it's technically not late, as we do allow things to be added until 10 o'clock the day of the meeting. So council can always decide if they don't want to hear an agenda, we can call them back and change that. In this case, the reason this is here is this is number 6, so I have no ability to add it to the agenda, even though it is related to the agenda. It needs to be adopted by council.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh, I think. Yes?
Yeah, I think that, this is primarily, looks like primarily to promote their event. There is a request for a bylaw variance. This event takes place at the end of August, and so I'd probably like to see this moved to the next meeting and put on there. We've got a long agenda with many things on our agenda. This doesn't seem that it has to be imminent this particular meeting, and so I'd recommend that it move to the July 22nd meeting.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, thank you.
I support Councillor Whitmarsh's idea. Certainly, there's enough fighting going on in Fort Langley right now. I don't think we need to set this meeting up to extend that fight. So I would prefer to hear the one delegation tonight that is opposed to this event, and they can come the following week to defend the event.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I think I'm going to support it because the other item is on the agenda, and I think we should hear both sides of the story. Mr. Backen.
Just because this may not be covered, a commentary very, very briefly. There's an interesting challenge happening with this concept. The event as it pertains to happening on federal lands effectively mean we have no jurisdiction. There's some arguments that can be made, but if you take that as your premise, why it's here is because the federal lands have said you must get municipal support for it. So even if the council, whenever they hear these delegations, may think this is a bad idea, it still could go ahead if the federal government simply says, oh, we're not going to require municipal approval. I'm just giving you a heads up as you hear the delegations that our role here is permissive by the federal government requiring them to have that approval going forward. So they may or they may not need that. Ultimately, it'll be up to the federal government.
And that's probably another reason I would like to hear it. Did you want to speak a second time? Just a moment to get back. Go ahead, please.
Well, they can't break our noise bylaw, can they? Because that's what they're proposing to do.
They could, like a train, an airplane, a port could. Federal land is not subject to our bylaws. It's only if they elect to be subject to them. Otherwise, we could say the trains couldn't whistle at night. We could say that planes can't have a noise above a certain level that would preclude them from operating. It's only when they elect to be subject to the municipal jurisdiction.
Well, a bylaw, a noise bylaw, I would think is something that they would be electing to be subject to as good neighbors.
That's right, as long as the council understands it's an election, because if it was already funded, for example, right now, I know by personal experience, there's a huge event going on in Quebec on the Plains of Abraham. It's a 10-day festival. The municipal government there tried to restrain that. The restraints could have put the thing in jeopardy, so it continued anyways.
Okay, but Mr. Backen, we're debating now the delegation, which we haven't even heard yet. So this is really to allow the delegation or not, and what information may or may not come from it. So,
Well, but don't we have a motion to refer it to the next meeting? I thought that
no,
was-
the motion right now is to allow it or not. We need 6 votes to allow it. The failure of 6 votes will automatically decline it.
Or we could put a motion to refer it to the next meeting.
Well, I think it would automatically be referred to the next meeting, would it not, Ms. Bauer?
Our staff would contact them and recommend the next meeting.
Okay, so, Councillor Richter? Done? All right, Councillor Woodward again?
Yeah, I just want to clarify some of the, again, through the chair to staff. Mr. Backen, you made some it's interesting comments about some of this land being used for events, and certainly looking forward to the delegation that's coming forward tonight about it. But I want to clarify, based on the submission from this delegation request, there's a layout here which council could look at that shows they're using township property for staging. So they seem dependent upon the township to run this event. Would that be correct?
I think they're assuming township, I guess, cooperation as has occurred in previous events. The township could elect not to provide that support. The event may then may have some implications on the event, or it may not. Depends upon what the nature of it. They may be able to relocate it someplace else. So.
And there also seems to be, if I have this correct, they have a road closure as part of this application, which of course nothing to do with the federal government.
In our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, just through the chair, question to staff. On the delegations tonight, are we referring to delegation D5, which is talking about the use of those lands for events? Is that what they're referring to?
Right now, we're talking about what would effectively be D6, the application by, I think it's Red Door, to be a delegation. The interesting part is that D5 is talking about the same event or same type of events where they're opposed to those events occurring because of the impact on the neighborhood.
Okay, so because when I looked at D5, it didn't specifically talk about this event. It talked about all events using that land, and us developing a strategy for how we use that land or how that land is used in the future. So it doesn't specifically talk about this Somerset Music and Arts Festival. It doesn't say that anywhere in there. If that's what the delegation is planning to talk about, it would be nice if they were more clear.
Well, but in fairness, Councillor Whitmarsh, excuse me for interrupting, we don't know what the delegation's really going to say, except in the request they're asking for bylaw variances. And the discussion we're having so far is that without that, they may not be able to have the festival. So even though it's in August or end of August, I think they need to have some answers as soon as possible.
Okay, it's just, I guess my point was that D5 in our package does not clearly state that it actually is talking about the Somerset Music and Arts Festival.
And that's true. But I guess it's enough that staff felt it was an item that would qualify this. Is that right, Mr. Backen?
It's because of the item already being on the agenda from the previous delegation as to the use of those lands and properties, we thought it'd be prudent to actually put the decision to council.
Any more discussion? So to be clear, then, we require a 6 vote majority to allow the delegation. We've discussed some of the merits of the delegation. I think we'll just call a vote then. Are we ready for that, Council? A1? Okay, I'll call the vote. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How can that be? Because Froze is here, so we're voting twice here, so I get 2 votes. That's pretty good. So getting rid of that, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It passes with Councillor Richter, Whitmarsh, and Arneson opposed. Oh, because you need 6. All right, so 1, 2, well, we had 6 for a minute, but that's not right. Okay, so it fails because we only have 5 in favor and 3 opposed. Is that correct? 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's the end of that. Now moving on to the adoption. Can I raise a point of clarification? No, because it's pretty clear to me. It failed. No, because it voted the next meeting. Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
I want to know, I know we're missing a member of council. Would this be something we could bring up at the beginning of the meeting when Mayor Rose? I'm trying to remember the mayor.
Okay, Ms. Powell, that's interesting discussion. I guess anything could be reconsidered.
That would be so, if I may procedurally.
But what would be the required vote? It would be with 9 here, you'd still need 6, or would you need 7?
6.
Be enough.
You would
Ms.
need
Bauer's
7?
pointing out you would need 6. It'd be a reconsideration that could occur anytime prior to closure of the regular afternoon meeting, and then the effect would be to effectively have a reconsideration with the full council.
But 6 from 9 would work.
Yes.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted clarification.
All right,
on
thank
that.
you.
I
And
may
meanwhile,
I may or may not bring it up.
I appreciate that. But meanwhile, to be clear, then they would be advised to come on 22nd of July.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Clear the queue. And now we're adopting the minutes of June the 24th. A motion, please. Councillor Davis, Councillor Arneson. Any discussion, errors or omissions? All in favor by show of hands. Opposed? Carried. And now moving into special closed meeting with the items listed. And anything on table, Mr. Bakken?
Yeah, just to slow down, we've done the agenda now. We have the minutes, and then we have to go into the closed.
Well, that's what I'm
Oh,
doing.
I'm sorry, we did the minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm way ahead of you. But I think you're worried that I was too far ahead. So we are taking a motion now to resolve in a special closed for the items listed on the agenda. And is there any items from staff, Mr. Bakken, or from council? Councillor Richter?
I wish to add 3 personnel items, 1 property item. Matter.
Can you repeat that, please?
3 personnel, 1 property, 1 litigation.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? No, I'll call the vote by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move into special close. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Do you have a pair?
No, but
By Carfault Developments Limited, and this is regarding protection enhancement area, guidelines, green roofs, parking protection, relocation, reconstruction of streams. So, Mr. Richardson.
This presentation is to respond to June 24th, 2019 council motions related to Carfault Development Limited and Mitchell Latimer development applications. In terms of the presentation outline, I'll provide the respective council motions, share Streamside protection enhancement area information as background, and how it relates to the Carfault Development Limited and Mitchell Latimer applications on council's public hearing agenda this evening. In relation to the Carfault Developments Limited application, I will also share information regarding parking and green roofs. The presentation also includes information relating to tree protection and replacement pertaining to the subject applications. In terms of background, Council at its June 24, 2019 regular evening meeting passed the following motions according to the minutes. The staff provided a presentation regarding SPIA guidelines, green roofs, parking, and protection of the Red Corded tributary in the regular afternoon meeting on July 8, 2019 prior to the public hearing. And in relation to the Mitchell Latimer application, the staff provided a presentation regarding relocation and reconstruction of streams in the regular afternoon meeting on July the 8th prior to the public hearing. In terms of Streamside Protection Enhancement Area legislative context, the provincial government adopted the Riparian Areas Regulation in 2006 that directed municipalities to implement streamside protection measures by March 21st, 2006, and provided enabling legislation to do so. At that time, there were 2 options for municipalities to either follow the Riparian Areas Regulation or adopt or equivalent or better streamside protection measures. The township at that time elected to adopt the equivalent or better option and did so by amending the official community plan to adopt streamside protection measures on all non-ALR lands that are implemented by a development permit area. This slide indicates jurisdiction of various levels of government with respect to watercourses and streamside areas. A protocol agreement between the Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the Provincial Ministry of the Environment, and the Union of BC Municipalities became effective March 31st, 2005. As noted earlier, the township's official community plan designates streamside protection enhancement areas adjacent to watercourses as a development permit area, meaning development in that area is subject to the objectives, policies, and guidelines of that OCP schedule. The official community plan also provides for exemptions to the SPIA requirements, including community and neighborhood plans were adopted after March 27, 2006, that incorporate updated watercourse locations and classifications and maintain the overall intent and objectives, policies, and guidelines. Those plans, such as the Latimer Neighborhood Plan adopted on September the 28th, 2015, are deemed to supersede the provisions of the bylaw, which is relevant to our discussions of the Mitchell-Latimer application that we'll speak to later. SPIA widths are determined by the color-coded watercourse classifications included in Map 11 of the OCP as indicated on the screen. As mentioned previously, if a municipal government chose to adopt streamside protection measures, those requirements must provide for equivalent or better streamside protection measures than those in the provincial RER. The riparian area regulations is fish-centric and only concerns itself with fish. It established minimum fish habitat and streamside protection requirements, but does not consider other important community and environmental benefits the streamside areas provide beyond minimum fish habitat requirements. Those are listed on the screen, such as wildlife habitat, groundwater quality, surface water quality, aesthetics, noise buffers, air quality, and recreational trails. Recognizing the benefits provided by wider streamside areas, the Township incorporated streamside protection measures on non-ALR lands that exceed the provincial requirements. So in instances where the RER would require 10 meters of setback, the OCP would require up to 30. So as noted, SPIA widths in the Township generally exceed provincial RER minimums, as indicated on this slide. In the subject example, south of 82nd Avenue in Willoughby, the RER from Yorkson Creek, a red-coated watercourse in a ravine context, is 5 meters, whereas the Township SPIA requirement is 30 meters. The Township Streamside Protection Enhancement Development Permit Area also provides for SPIA width modification known as a flex provision, where a boundary is decreased and increased by an equivalent amount such that the amount of SPIA is maintained subject to 2 key requirements. First, the decrease must be offset by an equivalent increase, and the minimum SPIA widths noted in the official committee plan must be maintained. This approach is used in the Carvolth Investments Limited application. This slide indicates the Carvolth Development Limited SPIA proposal, utilizing the flex provision, noting a proposed habitat loss of 479 square meters is offset by a proposed 500 square meter habitat gain while maintaining the minimum SPIA required setbacks. This slide indicates lands included in the Mitchell-Latimer application, illustrating watercourse mapping information on the left, and proposed relocations of those watercourses as indicated on the Latimer Neighborhood Plan Map 2 on the right. The Latimer Neighborhood Plan also states, changes to the areas shown on Map 2 may be considered in accordance with the streamside protection enhancement provisions of the official community plan. This is the case in the applicant's submission, as it proposes alternate SPIAs to that noted in the plan. 22,422 square feet of SPIA along the east side of 197th Street and 93,122 square feet of SPIA along the northern portion of the site is proposed. These proposed SPIAs encompass approximately 2.65 acres and provide 96% of the 2.6 acres of streamside habitat noted in the plan, with the difference offset by a restoration effort that exceeds the minimum planting requirements. Staff also note the proposal supports the intent of the plan to consolidate watercourses within reconstructed and enhanced SPIAs to provide higher functioning habitat relative to those current habitats. These habitats are proposed to be secured by the Streamside Development Permit 101057 as part of the subject application. Moving on to the next portion of the presentation. The Carvolth Developments Limited application proposes a 4-story office building with ground floor commercial space and a 3-story office building. As indicated on the slide, the proposal requires 285 parking spaces to meet zoning bylaw requirements, but is providing 312. Of those stalls, 173 are proposed at grade, and 139 underground spaces are proposed. The Carvolth Neighborhood Plan Development Permit Area also includes mention of green roofs with respect to site-specific design, stating incorporate green roofs where appropriate to help absorb stormwater, improve thermal efficiency, and provide outdoor amenity space for residents and workers. And in the context of stormwater source control, under the heading of extensive green roof. The Carvolth Development Limit application does not currently indicate a green roof. Council also discussed tree protection and replacement items relating to the subject development applications, as noted in the subject staff reports. In terms of the Carville Development Limited application, 145 significant trees were identified in the development portion of the site, with none proposed for retention. 121 trees in the SPIA area are to be retained, representing 1.9 acres, or 39% of the overall site. 86 replacement trees are required, and the applicant's arborist report indicates the majority of these trees to be removed are in poor or very poor condition, with structural defects that preclude retention in the context of underground parking. In relation to the Mitchell-Latimer application, 101 significant trees were identified on the development portion of the site, with none proposed for retention. 481 replacement trees are required. 378 of those are proposed on-site, with 103 secured for planting on off-site public lands. And according to the applicant's arborist report, trees within the developable area were found to be in a condition unsuitable for retention in the context of the proposed land use changes, and consist of native deciduous tree species including red alder, black cottonwood, paper birch, and native willow, with existing structural defects and dependent on surrounding trees for stability. The significant tree numbers noted do not account for tree health, structure, form. Staff are proposing amendments to the significant tree definition as part of Subdivision Development Servicing Bylaw 5382 on Council's evening agenda this evening that will add health, structure, and form condition components as determined by a certified professional arborist. And, Your Worship, that concludes my presentation today.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to questions. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. I just had, and I'm not sure, through your worship, to which staff or person who might best be able to answer this question. Part of, I think, the triggering for getting an extra review of this information was potentially the relocation of streams. And so I understand from the earlier slide and the SPIA that there's a relocation. If you could just go back to that one, please. Yeah. So the existing water courses then, if simplistically speaking then, in order to develop the site, they're being relocated, but they would have the riparian areas that otherwise would be appropriate for all of our regulatory requirements. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Arneson, just as indicated on the slide, on the left-hand side, you'll see yellow-coated water courses and green water courses there that were the subject of alteration by individuals over time.
Okay, historical.
Correct. Sorry. Indicated on the right portion of the slide are proposed habitats that would be equivalent or better than those shown there as incorporated in the Latimer plan, which are showing 40-meter setback areas and reconstructed streams, providing a better habitat function than what's there currently.
Okay, that makes more sense when you actually give us that further detail, because now I'm looking at that grid and I can see it looks more or less like those would have been maybe irrigation ditches or something similar to potentially drainlands, but eventually they get the characterization of being a fish-bearing stream or having nutrients. So then we're taking those values and translating them into an updated water course that meets our regulations. So I get that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff from council? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. Great to receive that education on those important policies. Thank you. Okay. I'll move on to F1. And F1 is Fort Langley street names and Indigenous signage. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Woodward, seconder. I have Councillor Arneson. I'll open up for discussion. Any discussion on F1? Councillor Long.
Thanks, Your Worship. Now, we are having a workshop on Wednesday. Would it be prudent to put this off until the next meeting? Is there urgency, or so some discussion maybe could come at that workshop if needed? I mean, sure. The timing is so close, that's all. I have no problem with it. Yeah. I'm delighted with the report, actually, but I just thought, hey, why not wait a week?
I'll just ask maybe staff. It looks like they've done a lot of consultation regarding this item with the Kwantlen First Nation. And so just to get staff's opinion on that, Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we had a reason for the deferral, it might be appropriate. Otherwise, I'm afraid that if we're deferring it just for the consultation, that would seem to be a bit of redundancy. So if there's some particular reason, we could certainly defer it, but saving that, I think it's better to process it.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't mind that then, but I mean, if anything comes up on Wednesday, we'll just pass it on, right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I wanted to mention too that in the recommendations and the motions, all 5 parts, that there might have been a small misunderstanding. So one of the main components was, of course, to rename Glover Road north of the Jacob Halty Bridge to Kwantlen Boulevard, but not to be renaming other streets in Fort Langley. It was more on the dual branding and complementary signage. So if you look in recommendation number 4, it says the potential dual branding and or renaming of select streets in Fort Langley. I don't believe that was the intent of the original motion, so I wanted to potentially suggest an amendment at some point here to remove and or renaming, because that wasn't my original intent.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure, you can make that amendment.
I can make it, or I'll let her speak first. But
sure,
I
got Councillor Davis, and I'll go back to you if you want to make an amendment. Councillor Davis?
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Rose. I was just, my question, I guess, would be we're going to amend the street naming policy, or this is just a one-time thing, but it sounds like maybe this was just meant to be a one-time thing. So maybe I should wait for the amendment. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Backen, just on that, so I'll take the amendment. So I just want to get clarification on that. We're not changing our street naming policy. This is looking at this one item, and then also it's not a street naming policy. This is just direction to if this went through as is, it's direction to staff to look at other naming opportunities in the area. It's not amending street naming policy, is it?
That's correct, Your Worship. Looking at this, I don't see any reference to the street naming policy. There is a reference to naming to other naming opportunities, but they would have to be considered in light of the policy.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering then if the 5th point here would also be maybe for the time being removed, and that we would just look at the first 3, which relate to what the intent of the motion was in the first place.
Yeah, that's possible. It could be done through amendment. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Woodward, yeah, you want to make an amendment? Oh, I don't know what's happening there. Okay, you're on.
Thanks. So I'd like to move an amendment that in recommendation number 4, that in the text there it says with representatives from Kwantlen First Nation about the potential dual branding and or renaming of select streets in Fort Langley, to delete and or renaming and just leave the dual branding. So move that.
So
that's in the recommendation number 4.
Remove and or renaming?
And or renaming. That was not the intent.
Okay, so the council directs staff to continue discussion with representatives of Kwantlen First Nation about the potential dual branding of select streets and present further. Okay. Amendment's been moved. Is there a seconder to it? Councillor Richter seconds it. Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. This is F1. Carries unanimously. So the motion as amended. Councillor Whitmar, should you have?
Yeah, well, I guess I mean, if the intent of the motion was to deal with the Glover Road and renaming that north of the Halty, Jacob Halty Bridge, then my suggestion would be that because we do have a sign naming policy, that we would remove the 5th bullet and not have that as part of this motion.
Okay, so you're moving an amendment that would remove the 5th bullet point.
That's correct.
Okay. Moved and seconded by Councillor Whitmarsh and then seconded by Councillor Davis. I'm just saying I'm going to open a discussion on that. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, no, I'd just like maybe Councillor Whitmarsh can fill in a little bit more what the concern is there, because it says present such opportunities from time to time for council consideration. So it's really just giving them the opportunity to explore that possibility, not so you're kind of closing the door on exploring the possibility of some dual branding in other parts of the township with some other First Nations. So I'm not sure that because the original motion had 2 parts. One was to formally rename the Glover Road portion to Kwantlen Boulevard, and then look at some of the dual branding, complementary signage for select seats in Fort Langley, potentially around the museum. And then this 5th one I think was, if I recall at the time, was some council direction to try to expand the scope of that to include other First Nations. So I think you're kind of closing the door on that if that's your intent. I just want to get that clarified, but I don't see the problem necessarily with them exploring those opportunities and bringing them forward if they exist. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I want to speak against deleting the fifth one because as a result of having attended the Bright New Day Reconciliation Circle back in 2015, that was one of the specific examples that was brought out during that day's activities, particularly towards the end, about how some areas in the township, for example, the Fort to Fort Trail, have areas of significance along that trail to the First Nations, and for them to see signage or some sort of recognition of their culture and their culture's meaning for those areas would be very important to them. So I see the fifth one as keeping in direct line with that Bright New Day Reconciliation Circle. So that's why I support leaving it in.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you. I just, I'm not sure if how much it would come up as far as item 5. So, I'm not sure if removing it would be any benefit or keeping it in would be a benefit. But my quick question, if I may, to staff, we have a number, more than one Indigenous group in the township. We have the Kwantlen, which I was just wondering if you've consulted the Katesee and perhaps the, I guess the Stolo, which is is it Matsqui, those folks? Were they were consulted, if I may, through a chair?
Mr. Backen?
Your Worship, as is the traditional approach, I think we simply sent them communications, and I'm not sure of the status of their response. This, however, is more particular to the Kwantlen First Nation because of the location, so I don't think we expect to hear much from the other First Nations.
Well, I know that they're not that far away, the Katesee there, and all these are unceded lands, and they all, if I may, they're all laying claim to it. I sit on one of the treaty commissions, and I know that they have got claim to quite a bit of land from Langley right up to the Coquitlam Lake. If I may, I know Mr. Chilabello's in the room here, if you might want to answer, if I may.
That's up. Mr. Backen?
Investigation was really focused around the Fort Langley area and the areas up around the fort. Those areas were occupied by the Kwantlen First Nation as well as on the McMillan Island. So I really focused just on that. Okay. Whereas if we were to look at other areas where there are the overlapping territories, we would specifically consult with those First Nations that are in that claim area.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. I understand that, and that'll be something we can explore in the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I don't think my intention wasn't to close the door on future naming opportunities in the township. It was simply suggesting that maybe it would be a separate motion because the first bullets are really Fort Langley centric, and to make it as a separate motion, which would be township wide. So that was the intent. I'm not really hung up either way, so if we want to keep it as one motion, I can live with either.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Long?
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to state that that's exactly what I think the fifth bullet does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because it talks about local First Nations cultural acknowledgement and language throughout the township. So that opens the door, and I think there was an amendment made by Councillor Ferguson to make sure we included the Katesee at least. And of course we have this display happening at the museum that talks about the 34 different Indigenous languages in British Columbia. So I don't know, I think there are a few different ones probably within the township potentially. So I think we should just leave that paragraph in it. It keeps the door, I don't know, we don't want to close the door, but it makes it open that we can look at other opportunities throughout the township. So I think we just leave it in.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Just to to recognize that maybe we should be in direct communication with our First Nations. And I don't really see that anywhere except that we've took number 4 out to not continue discussions with the representatives of Kwantlen First Nation. Because we want to do this for them, or do we want to do this with them? That's just
Yeah,
a
in
comment.
point 4, the only thing that was taken out were the words and/or renaming. That was all that was taken out.
Oh, okay.
Point 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my comment.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment. And it fails unanimously. So we're back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Richter. You're
No,
next. Okay.
I've already
Okay.
spoken. my
So I see
piece.
no further discussion. I'm going to call the question on the motion as amended. Yep, it's the motion as amended. Yep. Carries unanimously. All right, move on to F2. It's Cannabis Retail Options Public Engagement. This is to endorse the terms of reference for public engagement of cannabis retail options in the Township of Langley. And this, I know, stems from our Council Priority Committee meeting to look further into this. So if I could have a motion, please. Councillor Kuntz, seconder. Councillor Arneson. Lots of discussion here. Councillor Richter.
Yes, as part of the discussion with the public, I really still think quite strongly that we should be looking at a public retail model as opposed to a private retail model. And I'm wondering how strongly will that option be presented to the public? Because I believe it is a valid and viable option.
Maybe Mr. Seffi can answer, but I would hope that all options will be presented equally so the public can provide us with some input, and then council can still add their lens to it once we hear from that input. But Mr. Seffi?
That's correct, Your Worship. Some of the potential questions that will be included as part of the survey at a high level are presented for council's input as part of the terms of reference. So if council deems any of them to be not strong enough or too strong, we can certainly make a change prior to the actual survey going online or becoming effective, being implemented. But the intent is to be as unbiased as possible and present the survey and the public engagement process in a way that we can receive unbiased input and feedback from the community with respect to, firstly, whether we should proceed with some kind of a retail scenario in the township, and secondly, if so, what form should that take?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, I had sent around, if I may, a amendment which I wanted to read out right now. It's a simple amendment, just to conduct the research period up until the end of January 2020. That'd be January the 30th or January 31st, 2020. And I would so move that amendment.
Okay, so there was a timeline put out. So you wanted, I thought there was a timeline.
I want to change that timeline.
Okay, let me bring up my report here. I don't have it. Just so I can understand. Okay.
Your Worship, on the hard copy is page F25.
Okay, thank you. 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I'm on it. So, Councillor Ferguson.
Go ahead. What I'm basically doing is just changing number 1, the background research, to the January 2020. I guess the 30th of January or sometime in January 2020. Give the staff a little bit more time to review it, because I believe there's an awful lot of review. Plus, we have budget coming up, and I did mention that. And that would mean that public engagement would be after that, would be probably February to March or February to April, and then you would have your development regulation framework. They would put together that probably after April, would be probably in the close to the summer or close to July or something of 2020. And that would be basically just changing the actual format of the actual committee here, the actual recommendation.
Okay.
And I think I moved. I think there was a second as well.
I didn't see a second. Councillor Richter seconded it, so I'm going to go to that amendment. I'm concerned about change. I think staff have provided us what they feel they can do within the time frame. I don't want to delay it. If staff come back to us and say that they need more time, I'm sure council could entertain that. I'm not prepared to entertain it at this point. I think I'd like to see staff go through this process and get the information back to us as quickly as possible. If they feel they need more time, then I certainly would take that recommendation from them. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. Also, although I appreciate an attempt to amend this to get some more time and to help staff out in terms of their workload, I can't support extending the time either. I have a feeling that a lot of research and diligence has already gone into this process to lead us up until this point. We have a lot of information from other communities going forward, and so I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. We do have to tailor it to the needs and desires of the Township of Langley. And so for me, I think it's better just to try and process the information and go forward in the way that's already recommended in the timeline in the staff report.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
I just want to ask the mover of the amendment. I mean, is there some other reasoning that you can outline for us other than the staff are busy, just to help me out with what the thinking is or the reasoning is for the desire to slow it down a little bit? Thank you.
Councillor Long, and then Councillor Ferguson can answer. Councillor Long? Councillor Long? I'm waiting. No, you're on.
Go ahead. I'm on? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, I thought I was going to get an answer from. I thought there was going to be an answer to Councillor Woodward's
Well,
question.
he's
pushed my button.
He's pushed his button, so he'll be after you.
Well, I'm
so
going to
if you
be.
have any more questions, then
I
that's
guess
fine.
I'm happy to extend the time, but I have a concern about the whole process. So I'm going to say I don't agree with anything right now, but I'll speak more to it when we finish with this amendment.
Fair enough. Councillor Ferguson?
Well, yeah, I think that indeed it is news, not by any means reinventing any wheel. This is a brand new wheel. This is the new electric car. It started less than a year ago where the federal government made that decision, and some communities have decided to wait and see what the next steps would be. There's still a lot of unanswered questions about who can sell and who can't sell. Apparently, there's still a lot of stores within the region that are still open that shouldn't be open. They sell a medical and they don't have a license, but they're still out in place. There's just a lot of unanswered questions, and I'd like staff to spend. I mean, July, August. I mean, that's right around the corner. Some of us, probably not everyone, but some of us will be taking a holiday or something. And yeah, July, August. I mean, before we turn around, the background research is going to be done, and I believe that we're going to be coming into early in September. We're going to be doing budgets right away, and we're going to be doing a lot of other things. And I just would like us to slow down a bit, get more information. We may or may not want to proceed accordingly, but that's up to us. So I'm really of the opinion that we really have to look at this thing very, very seriously, and that's the reason why I let everybody know. I'm just not dropping this on everybody, that it was something that's important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in terms of background research. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities had an excellent panel discussion with communities from across Canada and the experiences they went through. They had someone from Saanich, from Delta, from Alberta, from Quebec, and I believe also from Ontario. And so I would encourage staff to go on the FCM website and to also have a look at because they taped all those panels, and I think they would find that information. And a lot of what the information that was presented focused on lessons learned, so that maybe we can avoid the pitfalls that they ran into.
Okay. Thank you. I think staff can take that.
Your Worship, may I just provide some comments for Council's deliberations? Bulk of the research has already been completed, so the timelines that you see are provided for Council's, consent and endorsement based on what staff believes to be practical and certainly workable. So in terms of, the staff resources required to fulfill this, as I said, the majority of the research has already occurred, including, as Councillor Richter referenced, the discussions at FCM. So it's just a question of, does Council wish to extend the public engagement process based on what is being presented beyond the timelines that are being presented, or does council wish to actually postpone, if you will, the beginning of the public engagement process? So just some thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, so no further discussion. So on the amendment, list. And the amendment fails with Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Arneson opposed. So we're back to the main motion. And I have a speaker's list still. Councillor Long on the main motion.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the process that we've all of a sudden undertaken, because at the CPC meeting, we talked about staff maybe coming back with what this might look like if we wanted to proceed from red to orange to green. And I use those terms because we had maps that showed all our surrounding municipalities and neighbors, and some had red marks and some had green marks, and we didn't have a mark at all. So I thought the first step would be, that we might consider going to orange. So when I supported it coming to get a report from staff, it wasn't to proceed so quickly. And here are the words in the report that says, Council has directed staff to develop a regulatory scheme upon consultation with the public. And I didn't support that. I supported that we would see what it looks like. And I think those were some of the words that we used. Well, let's see what it looks like. What kind of things can we do? And the decision to go from red to green was really what we were going to be deciding based on information given by staff. Now it looks as if we're proceeding regardless, and I don't think that's a wise thing. In my opinion, I don't think we should. I think people can grow some plants at home, and that's probably the better way to go. I don't think we should be in the business.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Just based on Councillor Long's comments, maybe it's possible to get staff to clarify whether or not the direction that's in the report matches where we ended up at the last meeting. I mean, that certainly wouldn't want the report to be different than what we previously directed. So I don't know if Councillor Long feels that way. We can get that clarified.
Mr. Stephanie, I just want to go and comment. Council made some directions. Staff came back with this. Our direction on this would give staff, or our decision on this would give staff further direction. It doesn't mean that they followed exactly to the word what we did or didn't do, but they provided us with something as best they could. So,
thank you, Your Worship.
The
intent of the report and recommendation to Council is to authorize staff to proceed with public engagement. That's all. In terms of the questions, as I said earlier, Council can direct staff to change the flavor, if you will, of the questions, or amend them, or just take some of them out and replace them with something else, if Council so wishes. But if I can refer you to page 6 of F2, the very first question that staff is currently suggesting is, should cannabis retail sales be permitted in the Township of Langley? So the rest will essentially follow from that. So there's no prejudgment of whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's just really just asking the public as to what they believe to be the right solution for the township, and then up to Council to decide what to do with the public input that is received.
Thank you.
Okay, so I appreciate that clarification. That helped a lot. I did have a small minor amendment, which I can leave. I just direct Council to page 4. Sorry, page. Where is it here? Page 4 of F2. So under key stakeholders that will be invited to participate in the public engagement program, you look down, we have local business improvement associations, but I think it's just a minor oversight. If we could add local community associations, so that would cover off the Aldergrove Business Association, Willoughby Residents Association, Fort Langley Community Association, in addition to the business improvement associations. I understand maybe why the business improvement associations are in there, but I think it's important to have, I'd like to have those officially listed as a stakeholder that would be invited and to respond. So I can make that now, or
I don't think it needs to be an amendment. As staff can take direction.
And
it is.
I'd appreciate that we can do direction, but I don't think we can just add the line local community associations right under local business improvement associations. I'd like to move that amendment, make it officially part of the reference.
Okay, amending the report then. I'll just do it as unanimous consent if there's no opposition, to that. It's just, okay. I see no opposition.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll do that as unanimous
consent.
That, I think it's fairly simple. Fairly direct. There is only one business improvement association, though.
That's correct. That's why I need to add the ABA.
I know.
Yeah, so we get the ABA in there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying there is only one in Township of Langley.
You're right, that it was plural, wasn't it? Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Just a comment on that. Does it, when the stakeholders are asked to participate and they don't, I guess, is it just one or all, or do we have to have everyone slide up to the table and if half don't, is that a problem? Or?
They will be invited.
You'd just be invited.
That's right. So it's up to them if they want to.
So the other question is on page 1, the local government where the proposed store is located is required to provide a positive recommendation in support of this application. So will local council, will we have a say on where that store is to be at every application?
So at this point, we're going to the public to find out what they want. Then Then policy has to be developed, and council can make all kinds of restrictions or they can make
but
it wide
we've
open.
changed a few things,
Right.
even though we want to put it out to public. We've already changed it. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, well, I have to agree with some of the comments by other councillors made. I mean, we are proceeding really relatively quickly on this. I know that we had just made the motion, we'd gone through. I mean, there's always lots of things we can learn more about applications and items of information. There's never a time where you can just stop and don't have to worry about any more information. So I too think that this is proceeding very, really quickly, and I was kind of somewhat caught off guard by it, as well as the level of information and the next steps and how quick it almost looks like, even though you're asking some folks to show up, it's almost a show up and just proceed accordingly as I guess in the legislation. So I think people's hands are tied as to making the decision, but those are my points of view.
Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I think that this area of cannabis retail options and developing a regulatory framework, I do think it's going to be somewhat of an evolving sort of thing. I think we're going to have more education and more knowledge as we move forward. I think it's good for us to start now. Let's get something into place, and I think over time those things will be adjusted and move and changed based on new information and feedback anyway. So I don't see any reason to delay. We've been a year and a half since the regulations came into effect. By the time this all gets done, we're going to be almost 2 full years here in Langley. So I think we need to get moving and get something in place now.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, make no mistake, even though there's wording here that we're going to go to the public and first of all ask them if they want to have retail sales, it's very obvious that we're going down that road with this motion. So many other communities in the Fraser Valley are not allowing any retail sales at all in their communities, and we were one of them. By passing this, we're saying, well, no, we're going to open it up and just tell us what shape you want it in. So I think if you support this, that means you're supporting retail sales in the township. And if it was overwhelming reply comes no, well, that's a whole other issue, but I doubt very much if you'll get that.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Well, with all due respect, I don't think just because you're engaging, it means necessarily that we're going to go forward. Because to me, it's like one of those diagrams where you've got different outcomes, but as soon as you stop at the no, there isn't anything else really to be said. So to me, it's up to council discretion to make those determinations, but we do need a factual basis upon which to decide, just like we decide all of our different policies that we want to engage. We want to engage people about whether or not they would prefer to have something in their community, would they prefer that it not be in their neighborhood, but they have to drive somewhere else to get it. So to me, we cannot get the kind of information that may inform a no, as far as we know, because I think that, we have all the decision making in the world once we have factual information to go forward with. So I think it's a good range of stakeholders that have been identified. I think it's important to hear from the entire community, most particularly when I looked at the list of those who would be key stakeholders. I thought about the school district, because I've been to many meetings recently where there is a concern amongst educators about what's happening at their schools. And I grew up in the era of propaganda agenda against cannabis smoking, and so I understand that there is still a real bias, but I also have been very supportive of opportunities to consider discussing and finding out more about medical cannabis and all the other uses that have now come to light because it's been legalized. So I think it's important to get more details. We are making this as a Made in Langley solution, so I'm really open and eager to find out what the community wants.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, point of order. I've spoken
You have-
twice, right? A point of information.
Yeah, so do you have a point of order, or do you want to speak again?
Point of information. No, I'd like to ask if this. Yeah.
What's your point of?
Point of information. Is this about medical marijuana or
No,
recreational?
It's about retail sales of recreational.
Recreational.
That's right. Thank you. That's right. Okay, I'll call the question on the motion as amended. And it carries. Councillor Long, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Move on to LED street lighting conversion project. Can I have a motion? Councillor Davis moved it. Councillor Arneson seconds it. Looks like a pretty good deal to me. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the urgency is about this right now. And it's quite a hefty price tag at $4.3 million. And I'm wondering, is it not possible for us to look at a phased replacement instead of forking out $4.3 million to do them all right away?
Mr. Seffi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess from staff's perspective, it is not being rushed, Your Worship. If anything, we're kind of behind many other jurisdictions who've already proceeded down this road. If Council wishes for us to do it in a phased approach, certainly that's something that could be done, but the anticipation is that it will likely cost a lot more. In fact, what I can confirm for Council is that we have been down a path of a phased approach for quite some time. Over a number of years, we have been implementing sort of areas or changing areas or neighborhoods, if you will, to LED lighting. So this is the most cost-effective and efficient way of doing it. And while it will cost a significant amount of money, we believe in the long run, it's certainly worth it in terms of the business case that has been completed.
Well, I'm just a little concerned about the upcoming budget, and I think where we can save the taxpayers a bit of money is a good thing, as opposed to doing everything all at once. So I'm in favor of referring this back to staff to look at phasing.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yep.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Woodward seconds. Discussion referring it to staff for phasing. Councillor Long.
Yeah, I would concur with what I heard staff say, because I asked about this 20 years ago. And I don't know how many phone calls you get that streetlights are out, so there's that aspect too. But I mean, it just seems such a waste to see those lights burning and the amount of electricity that they're consuming, and we're all paying for that. So in a way, we're alleviating the taxpayer in the long run of the cost of powering up those very, very inefficient metal halide lights. The other thing is the burnout and the time involved in getting a street light replaced. It's very, very labor intensive, and in the meantime, there's a safety issue too. So with LEDs, they last so much longer. They're so much more efficient. I think it's something we need to do, and phasing it in. I think we heard already that it's already kind of been phased in. So let's get at it.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. In principle, I really do understand the caution about an extra budget item, but looking at the overall report, I really think that it's a very convincing business plan that they have put forward. It seems to me that 11 and a half years, we're going to get this as a payback period. And there's, in addition to the energy costs, there's a lot of other advantages, I believe, based on what the report says about safety issues, people being able to get better illuminations, probably good for crime. I think the cost savings alone for staff are probably, as referenced in the report, they're quite significant. So I think for all of those reasons, I'm sure when we see it as a budget line item, there would be an opportunity then to say no. But I think for now, for me, I really want to support this because I think it's a step forward. And as Mr. Safi has referenced, we are lagging behind other communities in doing so. So I'm in favor of doing it.
Councillor Davis?
I have the similar things. I don't know where the 11 years was. I thought it was shorter than that. But anyhow, light light, how light wanders, that helps the LEDs. The fact that we'll save 50%, result in a 50% energy savings over the current install, 50%, and then the township 7,000 existing streetlights consume 17, a cost of over 600,000. So it's at 300,000 a year. No, you know what? I don't think I would support this amendment to have to move it, slow it down, or whatever. But I think it's a good thing. I think we should get on it right away, and we should sell the old light bulbs to another municipality that uses them.
Excellent. Good idea. Councillor Ferguson.
That's creative. There you go. We can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to say I don't think I'll support the amendment. I appreciate the tenure of it, saving money when eventually we're going to get some of this back. I did want to ask, is this the same type of situation? I remember water back in either the 70s or 80s where we have missed the boat with BC Hydro and the FCM regarding grants and subsidies, if I may, through the chair.
Your Worship, there has not been anything that we have missed. There could be opportunities, and staff will certainly make sure that any funding opportunities that may arise, we take advantage of, but we have not missed anything at this point.
Oh, I was just reading in the report, we also considered an energy savings performance contract, ESCO, but using a loan from the MFA would be favorable. I'm not sure what you mean by that one, if I may.
What I meant was we have not missed any opportunities, which I believe the question was from Councillor Ferguson in terms of grant opportunities being provided from BC Hydro or other sources. And further, that we are committed to making sure that we take advantage of any cost-sharing opportunities that may arise. Now, in terms of the borrowing, I will defer to Director of Finance, Ms. Sinclair, in terms of the MFA and where we might be able to most prudently borrow from.
Through your worship to Councillor Ferguson, if I'm reading this correctly, and Roland can give me a nod if I'm right, this ESCO is just another form of financing that is available for this project from the supplier, I'm guessing, and it would be at a higher interest rate than we could have achieved through MFA.
Okay, well that answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to suggest, so I know this maybe not be technically on the referral, but I wanted to get a clarification on the recommendation that's being referred in around Mr. Backen, potentially a question through to staff, Mr. Backen. It says be included as part of the 2020 budget for council's consideration approval. So I was a little confused by that. I mean, are we pre-approving this, or is it simply going for consideration to approve, and that's just a typo?
It's being approved for inclusion in the 2020 budget, but council still has to deliberate on that budget. So it would appear in the budget item as being something that's been, I guess, slated for council's consideration.
Above the line.
So it would be above the line, essentially. We'd be giving a direction to be above the line. So, I mean, I appreciate the referral too. I think it's something we can definitely look at in the budget process to maybe look at spreading this out over a period of time, maybe reduce some of the borrowing costs, look at the borrowing costs versus the return. But I mean, do we have to refer it back to come back with phasing and then send it to the budget, or can we sort of find a way to send it to the budget with consideration of phasing as one of the items to discuss inside the envelope? I don't know if that would be okay with the original intent of the referral, but send it to the budget with that understanding that we would maybe want to consider that. Does that make sense? Am I clarifying that correctly?
I was looking for a ruling from the chair.
Okay.
It sounds like it's a bit of a twist to the original motion.
So
I want to capture the intent, but not make another report come back, have this be back on the agenda, and then send it to the budget with that. Can we just send it to the budget with the understanding that we want to consider phasing?
Well,
which is not what you did in this motion particularly.
Well, we could at the budget time. I just want to ask, in reality, in real terms, how long is it going to take to change every streetlight in the township of Langley? In like
About 2 years, Your Worship.
about 2 years, so we're already phasing in 2 years. We're just
The challenge is that the savings, the sooner we can do it, the sooner the cost savings occur, and then of course the sooner that the clock starts to run repaying the debt. So there's an automatic 2-year phase into it. So we would, however, likely try to borrow once and go through the middle of that process, depending upon what funds look like.
Okay,
So that borrowing is not necessarily phased, but of course it'll take time. But then we would borrow all the money, know that it's funded, and they would do it as quickly as staff could do it as quickly as they can. But then we would still have one borrowing. I don't know how the word is going to be used, but one attempt to borrow the money at once and then spend it over 2 years, maybe. But I just don't want to, because I think, just clarify, the referral was to have it come back with a report to outline phasing. Was that rather than send it to the budget with phasing?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So is there some way maybe we can, sending it to the budget with the recognition that we want to have phasing as part of the budget consideration? Would that be helpful?
That can be done at the budget deliberation without a motion, because we do have that opportunity at the budget time to say, okay, no, we're going to take them.
Just trying to save a step, but I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Richter?
Well, I still think 4.3 million is a big price tag, considering that there's a payback period of 11 and a half years. Like, what is the rush? I would much rather see this staggered out over 4 years at $1 million a year than a fell swoop of 4.3 million that we're going to have to go out and borrow, in addition to all the other things that are in the pipeline for borrowing. Like, we've got to get a handle on our borrowing, and these kinds of projects isn't doing that for me.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
You know, I understand the borrowing thing, but maybe a question through to staff, if I may, Mayor Froese.
Yeah.
The life cycle of a LED streetlight is expected to be 20 years compared to the average 7 years of expectancy. This reduces maintenance costs by up to 80%. Is that a tough question? Can you pick a figure out of what our maintenance? Because it's not the light bulb. It's the man in the truck and the cherry picker and unscrewing the light bulb and putting it back in. Would that be in the maintenance, or would that be in that statement? Like, what's 80%? I guess the question would be, how many Davises does it take to undo a light bulb? Okay, but I'm just saying, is that figure in there? I know we got 50% energy savings.
The whole family, one to hold the bulb and the other to turn the pole.
Yeah. And then 2 or 3 to argue about it.
But I believe, does the cost include not just the bulb, but the cost incurred by the township too?
That's correct, Your Worship. The savings that are quoted in the staff report in the executive summary section, Your Worship, includes the energy as well as the maintenance and operating. Maintenance and operating, which includes the energy costs as well as the staff labor intensive part of the replacement costs.
So it's about 40,000 a year. Like, it goes from 340, the 340,000, and maintenance cost savings of 40,000 of approximately 380,000 a year.
Correct.
So that's a lot of money right there. Anyhow, okay, but I get the idea of it's a lot of money, but it's a carbon footprint too, and that's something I guess we have to lead the way. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Long?
Okay, am I the only one that's looking at this a little differently, and I'm probably the least educated on council here? It says here that there will be no cost to the taxpayer. In fact, we're going to save $100,000 a year because we're going to borrow money for $290,000. So it's all a loan. The $290,000 pays the loan and interest off, and the savings $380,000. So aren't we making $100,000 a year and doing the right thing and costing the taxpayer nothing? Although we're taking out a loan, but it's just the right thing to do, and there is no cost to the taxpayer. In fact, there'll be $100,000 a year saving.
Taxes can go down.
That's correct, Your Worship. The savings would, more than cover the costs.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this is on the referral. I think I agree we need to move ahead with this. This is what they call good debt. Your roof is leaking. You borrow money to repair the roof before the house rots. And we're going to save money on this. This reduces our GHGs. This is good for the environment and the right thing to do. So I'm not going to support this. So I'm going to call the question on the referral. And that's on F3. Okay, you're all good. Okay, that referral fails. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmar, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Long, Councillor Davis opposed. And now we're back to the main motion. And any further discussion? I got a list here still. Councillor Ferguson, did you? Oh, okay. So I'm going to call the question on the main motion.
I like all spurned out.
Yeah. It carries with Councillor Richter opposed. And so now we move on to F4. And this is a motion to receive. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Kuntz, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion on that receipt. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how come there's no action plan here? We're just receiving this report for information. So does that mean we're not going to fix 208th Street now?
Mr. Back, I believe this, maybe you can help, or Mr. Seffi. This is for our information. If council wished to give direction to staff, they certainly could at any time, but this was as a result of, I think, council wanting to get more information on the total costs. Mr. Back, can you
That's
elaborate?
effectively correct, Your Worship. We were instructed to come back with some estimation of the total costs in accordance with the previous resolution, and I think Mr. Seffi has a few slides that he can actually run through that might help explain the situation.
Okay, so we'll maybe go through the slides and then I'll carry on to the discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is actually in response to Council direction. Council asked for a report that would provide an analytical review of the memorandum that was provided by Councillor Woodward to Council. So essentially that's the reason why there's no recommendations, because it was Council direction to just simply analyze the memorandum at a more in-depth level and provide information to Council in terms of implications, etc. So I guess just a few slides, as Mr. Backen referenced. Firstly, just to distinguish between DCCs and CACs, this particular report is a subject of what are known as community amenity contributions, and there are, while there is distinctive and specific language in the Local Government Act, in the provincial legislation regarding DCCs, there is no specific language in the Local Government Act regarding CACs. So essentially is an interpretation of other provisions that has allowed municipalities to take advantage of community amenity contributions, which we must be very careful on because of the fact that there's no specific provision in the legislation. The DCCs, again, some of this may be repeat information for some members of council, but I thought it's worthwhile just to mention that DCCs cover certain specific assets and infrastructure, whereas CACs may be more flexibility provided for in terms of what they could be used for. So DCCs, roads, drainage, sewage, water, and parks, whereas CACs may be obtained and negotiated for a number of different amenities, such as fire halls, libraries, police stations, and greenways, just to name a few. There has been a long history of DCCs in the township, going back to 1986, whereas greenways, or rather CACs, the concept of CACs are fairly new, with greenways being the only amenity that we have obtained CACs for, formally speaking, over the past 12 years. And since last year, we have a formal policy adopted by council for CACs on four other community amenities, including RCMP detachment, as well as recreation facilities and greenways going forward. So in terms of the specifics of the model that was presented by Councillor Woodward, there were specific road sections that were identified, and this table provides those road sections. As you can see, there are, I think, eight sections of road that are identified, and this is just a pictorial of those sections showing council the location and the extent of those improvements. These are the estimated costs based on the construction cost and the land acquisition costs. So the reason why those have been included is because if we were to proceed with construction, there would have to be, if council was to direct staff to proceed with the policy, there would have to be borrowing not just for the land acquisition, but also for the construction, because we're essentially advancing history, is a term that's used often with respect to the construction part of it, which although included in the DCC program, we have no funding available at this point. So the segments are shown here, and they're also included in the council report for council's information based on the cost of the land, which is about 16 acres using $3.2 million per acre, which is based on more recent transactions, based on information provided by our property management department. So the 16 acres needed to provide the widening for those sections of the roads, multiplied by $3.2 million gives you the land cost, and then we have added 10%, what we call soft costs, related to conveyance, surveying, etc. And then the DCCs are in relation with the construction costs based on the 2019 program that council gave 3 readings to. These are the areas that would then be subject to the CACs, or actually, sorry, these are the areas that the CAC calculation is based on in terms of the developable areas that are above the top of bank. So anything that is not developable has not been included, and we have come up with about 900 acres of land that will be subject to the process, or the process has been based on. So $52 million is the construction cost. We've added 10%, which is about $5 million for the soft costs. The total approximate developable land area is 900 acres, which results in a community contribution target. We have to be careful with the language. It's always a target amount of $63,000 per acre. Just to show council the existing fees and charges that we already have in place, Your Worship, the intent is just to sort of make sure council has full information before they deliberate on the proposed policy with respect to the road widening policy. So as you can see, for a single family development, the existing amenity contributions, existing CACs, existing DCCs, sorry, not existing, but proposed DCCs based on, again, the 2019 program that council has given 3 readings to, as well as the external DCCs by Metro Vancouver, the regional DCCs, and the school site acquisition charges, totals to about $100,000 per lot for a single family dwelling. The guidance that does exist in the provincial legislation, Your Worship, is council, before they actually proceed with a community amenity contribution discussion, they must consider the impact on affordable housing. So this is just to make sure that council is aware of that and is not challenged at the future date by somebody that says that this has not been considered. And this, Your Worship, I know it's takes a bit of a magnifying glass, if you will, to review and digest, but it's essentially providing information as to a potential borrowing scheme that would be based on $57 million borrowing at an anticipated 2.82% interest rate, which would see us cover the cost over a 20-year period with an overall payment of $75 million, including interest of the $57 million. And that concludes the presentation, Your Worship, if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Worship, one point to clarify, Mr. Sefa, you mentioned the charges per unit, but also there are the charges per acre, and I think we have to differentiate that the $63,000 per acre is not additional per unit because it depends on the number of units. So, for example, if it's 10 units per acre, that's going to be a charge of $6,300 per unit to represent the $63,000 per acre.
That's correct, yes. The table that you see on the slide here that has tried to normalize all of the costs, because as Mr. Backen said, some of those costs are a per acre basis. That's why the density at the top is important to take a look at. So, for example, the single family one on column 1, the first column, Res 1, is based on a typical or average single-family residential of 6 units per acre. So in that case, the $63,000 anticipated at a high level for the proposed CACs would translate to about $10,000 per unit.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll move on the list. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is a very, very extensive report and an awful lot of decision-making to be made here. I was wondering if we could go either through looking at the ones, prioritize some of these particular routes, some that we can maybe do and some we could wait or something, or wait for development to happen. I know that some of the cases, particularly the cases on 200th Street, I think that they could be placed in the future rather than now, because we already have quite a bit of work already done in 200. But I'm looking at the major ones that we could prioritize 2 or 3 as to important now, and then the second one not as important, the third one for the future. And like I see, for example, 80th Avenue, 200th to 208th, right? That's an important one that we've been working on for a while. And I see like some of the sections of 208 that Councillor Richter mentioned as well that are important as well. So, I mean, I'm not sure how, Mr. Mayor, how you want to address just an awful lot of stuff we have to cover today.
Well, this motion right now is just to receive. And this,
okay.
So, you know, at this point, I don't know if Council
I know we're receiving
to,
it, though, but what do we do in the future? And I think it's important to receive it, but we've got some real tough decisions to make here. And I'd like to suggest to Council, and I'm not making a motion, that we should prioritize some of these things for the future. So what's important and what we can do and what we can't do, because it's an awful lot of money.
That's right.
That's my point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmar.
Yeah, just a couple of questions that I had regarding the report. Just so that I understand, and I think you did just speak to it, Mr. Seffi, but so that I understand again. On Table 2 on page 5 in our package here, that's the little type of charges. Yeah, this one here. This particular table currently does not include this suggested amenity fee that we would have in Willoughby. This does not include it currently. Is that correct?
Your Worship, that's correct. The title of this slide, as it states, is existing fees and charges.
Right. So when it says 94,000, if we were to add this fee, this would push that particular column to closer to 105,000. Is that because you said about a $10,000 roughly for a single-family home? That's correct. Ballpark. Okay. Yeah. All right. That's helpful. Another question I had is on page 4. Under community implications, there's a sentence, it's the third sort of paragraph there, and it says here, the second paragraph. It's the last sentence says, it is anticipated that the proposed policy, if adopted, would have an impact by exerting downward pressure on land values. I'm wondering if you could just, maybe through to staff, just explain what you mean by downward pressure on land values. It seems to imply that that would cause a decrease in land values by having this amenity.
The intent is to, I guess, convey the concept, Your Worship, that the market has other forces that are beyond, I guess, a individual municipality's policies. So what I mean by that is the market will determine what a proponent or a buyer, a purchaser, will pay for a home. So if you have that as your underlying sort of premise, the costs are also given. So a developer cannot, somebody who develops land and then builds the stock to then sell to the ultimate users, can only raise the cost so much. So what would that mean is that in effect, they would have to either not do anything or try and negotiate a lower purchase price for the land. And you know, if you extrapolate that to more than one developer, eventually the land values will reduce because of the fact that the costs have increased and the market can only bear to pay so much in terms of the ultimate product.
Okay. That's helpful. Last comment and maybe question is that it mentioned that with borrowing costs, we would be close to 75 million to do all these roads, and that's over a 20-year period. So we'd borrow the money, 57, then we'd have borrowing costs, so a total would cost us about 75 million to get the roads completed now. Based on what I'm reading, about 57 million of that would be returned to us over time through this community amenity fee. Am I following along that we won't get the full 75 million back, but we would get, 75 million, we might get 57 million of it back, but over 20 years, so we would still have a cost. We'd have to end up covering the carrying costs, and those would be borne by the township. Is that sort of correct?
That's correct, yes. In theory, again, I have to emphasize the theoretical nature of the exercise so far. In theory, the cost will come back because it's a offsetting cost, if you will. So whatever is being expended, it will then be collected and then will pay for the costs.
Right, but it's not it's not accounting for the carrying costs. It's accounting for the upfront cost to acquire the land and to build the road.
That's correct.
But to clarify, there's two components. There's the road construction and the actual land costs. The $63,000 CAC would cover the total cost of borrowing over the 20-year program, but there could be a cash flow issue. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it would cover the actual interest. The 75 would be recovered, whatever the actual costs were. The challenge is that of cash flow, because even after 20 years, there may be still some properties that aren't developed, or the pace of development may not be sufficient to maintain it. So there's always going to have to be a bit of a buffer to make sure that there's enough cash flow to cover it, or general revenue may have to be therefore used to cover it. By and large, the program uses CACs and DCCs that ought not to have a direct impact on the taxpayer unless the taxpayer has to help the cash flow requirements because the CACs are too low to make the payments, or the DCCs have insufficient funds to actually commit the construction.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody, thank the staff especially for the report and the assessment, the very detailed review of the memo I sent. I had a couple of questions. We can start with this one, this slide here. So I want to clarify too that it doesn't account for those specific property owners that are currently paying less for the land because they're giving the land to the township and building the road on it, which is increasing their cost on the developments. When then they're going to be, if they're getting a flow back from the program, it's not going to be reflected in this chart that you're potentially adding some costs to some development, but actually reducing the costs on some others. Mr. Sevi, can you outline if that's correct?
That is correct.
So can you provide a little bit more understanding for council around when someone's buying this land, of course, they're factoring in the net developable. They're having to purchase the road portion and then dedicate that to the municipality and build a road on it, which is factored into the per unit cost. Is that correct? Would that be very similar to the process you described in the CAC and the DCC costs?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yes. So this would, some would benefit and some would have to pay a little bit more because they're not on the road, and perhaps that would even out across the 900 acres as opposed to all costs rising on all 900 acres?
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that. And of course, there is a cash flow issue potentially with this in terms of the interest and expropriation costs, if those are necessary for some components, that would be added to the per acre number that was suggested, so that you're not really going to 2.94 property tax increase, that potentially you could be borrowing and front loading some of that interest into the program, which is going to be paid back from development over the length of whatever we determine it would probably take to build that out from development. And then we could, of course, prioritize some sections and start with those, which would not be a full sort of $70, $90 million borrowing program. That would certainly be possible. Mr. Sevi?
I believe so.
Yeah, I believe
yes.
so. Okay. So I think that's all I had. And again, I appreciate the report. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Again, a great report. Thank you very much for all this information. And the information focuses on how to pay for the work that is proposed here. But I'd like to know what it's based on as far as traffic studies. Anecdotally, people say, yeah, it's congestion, but that means something different to different people. Whether you wait one light sequence or two or three, where does it get to a point where we're really restricting the flow of people and goods? And has any of that work been done to put the science behind whether, and I think it goes to Councillor Ferguson talking about prioritizing. And so we're prioritizing based on, well, I live next to the street and I drive it all the time and I don't like it, but, what's the science behind it? And the other question, so there's one piece of it. The other one is the 216 interchange is slated to open within a year. I don't know the exact date, but I'm assuming within a year. That'll have an effect on traffic patterns throughout that portion of Langley. And I don't know if we fully understand how that's going to affect the traffic patterns and reduce congestion in some areas, maybe increase it in others. I don't know. But has any of that work been done, Mr. Seffi? And do we have any idea of basing this on science, on what are the traffic counts? And are they such that council then has that information to decide whether they want to spend this kind of money? That'll be my question.
No, Your Worship. The answer is that the technical analysis has not been done in terms of, I guess, what you have termed as real improvements that could be achieved. That would take some time in terms of analyzing each intersection, because as you can appreciate, the way that traffic analysis is typically done is at intersections. What is the delay? How long is a passenger or a vehicle likely going to have to wait in terms of light changes, signal changes, before they're able to go past that intersection based on the, I guess, what we call volume versus capacity ratio of the intersection. And it's a question of further analysis to determine what the actual improvements might be. And I will also caution or need to advise Council that despite what I said just now, in terms of the technical analysis, it's always an assumption as to what driver behavior might be, because even though it's based on current traffic volumes, that would then drive the results that would then be presented to Council. It is quite likely that there will be changes in those results because of driver behavior. What I mean, again, I guess put it another way, is that even though the number of vehicles, say, on 208 Street might be 20,000 per day at this point, and then the calculations, the vehicle versus the volume versus capacity calculations would then be based on 20,000. If we go through the improvements and open up, if you will, certain sections that have not yet been widened to 4 lanes, it is quite possible that people in the area will then take advantage of that, and then before you know it, the number of vehicles is not 20,000 but rather 25,000. So the calculations that we would have done to come up with a V over C ratio will then be, I guess, redundant, because we're now seeing an increase in the number of vehicles using that section of road because of the fact that it's been improved recently.
That's right, and that's what will happen at 216 interchange. There's going to be some major changes on how people access Highway 1 from North Langley, and also it'll move traffic from what may be considered highly congested roads to other roads. But it's just an interesting question. I think there's a lot of work there, and I just wanted to explore that. Councillor Woodward?
I just had one follow-up question about where Councillor Ferguson was going on what the next steps might be. There's some public consultation that sounds like a good idea, public at large, and some of the members of the development community. Some potential timelines for that would be September, October, Mr. Seffi?
Subject to Council direction, certainly we could do that in September, October.
Okay, so I think that's something I would definitely like to consider, but I'd like to just leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you. So I see no further discussion, so I'm going to call a question on receipt on F4. It carries. Councillor Long opposed. So now we move on to we move on to correspondence, the minutes of committees. There's one Mayor Standing Committee, Development Management Process Review, Seniors Advisory Committee, Council Parties Committee, and Agriculture Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee. Councillor Ferguson moves, second. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson. And on receipt, Councillor Richter, is this on receipt, or do you have a question on one of them?
Okay, so are we just receiving all the minutes? Because the motion here is that council adopt the minutes from CPC.
Oh, yeah, okay, adopt the minutes.
Okay.
What is it? That's the sorry.
No, but I don't want to adopt the minutes if adopting the minutes means that we only got partway through the procedure bylaw. If adopting it means we're going along with the changes we've made to date, I don't think that's right. I think we should complete our review process before we adopt the changes. I wanted to get clarification on the intent of that word.
Definitely. So all we're doing is adopting the minutes. There's been no, for any changes that would have to be a separate motion of council in the bylaw process. So we're just adopting the minutes that the meeting happened and this was recorded. Is that correct, Ms. Bauer?
Yes, that would be correct. It could be done either way. If we can adopt the minutes as they are, and then we will, of course, bring up the council procedure bylaw again at our next meeting.
Okay. That's right.
Yeah, okay, so by adopting these minutes, we're not saying we're approving the changes.
We're not approving the changes, we're just adopting the minutes. That's what happened at that meeting, that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question that I had was with regards to the first set of minutes for the Mayor's Standing Committee on Development Management Process Review. The signatures are switched.
Oh.
On page 3.
Oh, look at that. Normally I catch that.
Mayor Froese is not the community co-chair.
Representative, co-chair. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Well, it says, it's community representative, co-chair, council representative, co-chair. So with those changes, we'll make that change. Yeah, thank you. Good catch.
And I was just wondering, hasn't there been another meeting of this committee?
Yes. Yeah, but those minutes.
Those minutes will be coming when?
They would be coming, these minutes were approved at the last meeting, so the minute, or Ms. Bauer, you can help me out, because I thought the same thing, because we had another meeting, but those minutes have to be approved at the meeting, don't they? And so that meeting will be coming up.
Yes, they would come after they were adopted.
That's right.
Okay.
So
and then, that's all my questions.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just want to let, on the Mayor's Standing Committee, actually, I was at that meeting. It's got down not as present.
It has your time when you arrived, because you came a little, it has you there.
Does that mean I'm not present?
Oh, you're present. So you joined the meeting at 6:27.
Okay, so is that...
So on the top, present.
Well, I'm here right now.
That's fine.
Am I present?
So, Ms. Bauer, on the minutes where it says present and it lists those, if you come late, you still record the councillor. That's an error.
Yeah, we'll have that amended.
Okay, that'll be fixed.
And that'll be the next meeting too, because I think I've
We'll
already read the minutes and they're.
It's a good
I
catch.
Bring that up again.
That's a good catch. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question on adopting H1. Carries unanimously. And H2 is Agriculture Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee recommended motion. Council asks staff to review the control of nuisance animals policy, in particular to look at the best practices in other jurisdictions, and that the review explore a principle that states that if a dam may result in serious harm to fish or fish habitat, this would be an additional reason for removal. The Agriculture Advisory Committee co-chair is moved by Councillor Whitmar, second by Councillor Davis. A little discussion, a little background on it, perhaps. Councillor Whitmarsh? Yeah, I got Arneson pushed the button first, but do you want?
Oh, hooray. I'm a little quicker at the draw. Well, maybe I should let Councillor Whitmarsh. I don't mind letting him speak first because I'm going to object to the motion.
Sure. Councillor Whitmarsh.
I think that this was a meeting by the committee, and we had a presentation from staff on current practice, particularly as it related to beaver dams, and there was a discussion around the table that it should include just a relook at a review of best practices to make sure that what we're doing with beavers and beaver dams is meeting best practices. And then it was also suggested that one of the things to look at and to explore, not saying it has to be there, but to explore that if the dam is going to result in serious harm or to a fish habitat, that might be another reason for removal of a dam. But it was also primarily to look at best practices and what's going on in the area.
Thank you. Hey, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting. I would have been interested to hear the broader discussion and also the presentation. I know we've had this discussion before with respect to beavers. I'm wondering, through your Worship, if it might be possible to divide this motion up into two components. They are two really separate entities, and if not, I'd like to just speak to the second half of the motion, which I feel did not really address what the attempt of the drafter had in mind. So I, being the drafter, I'd like to speak to that. So if I could just move that it would be divided. Yeah.
Okay, a seconder to that. Okay, I'll just do by unanimous consent if everyone's in agreement.
So can I just...
Okay, so yeah, carry on.
Thank you.
You got the floor.
So to review the control of nuisance animal policy, I think that's a great idea. I think that our policy currently is rather, it's not very detailed, and I know that there are best practices that should be explored, so I do think that's a good idea. But I just wanted to clarify in the second point, I'm personally struggling to understand the nature of the conversation that would have resulted in this, if I can just explore a principle that states that if a dam may result in serious harm to fish or fish habitat, that this would be an additional reason for removal. And I guess I'm perplexed because when I wrote the motion, and maybe I wasn't clear enough, actually the reason that dams were being addressed in the first place is because they actually create fish habitat. So it wasn't the intention, from my perspective, to consider maybe dams were causing a problem, but as a matter of fact, the condition upon which dams should not be removed, because in fact they're a crucial component of creating habitat. And it's also good for climate change and mitigation. So, overall, I wish we could amend or strike the second part, but I do believe it would be helped overall if what the secondary part of the motion, the original motion, was to have the fur bearers come and make a presentation. And I thought that they would probably be helpful in clarifying some of these issues that perhaps were a little bit murky in terms of what came about and gave rise to this particular motion.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question on the first paragraph on H2. Carries unanimously. And I'll call a question on the second paragraph, H2. Sure. Let me just get your council vote and Councillor Richter. Sorry, Councillor Richter.
Is Councillor Arneson suggesting a rewording of the second part?
Discussed it, but she didn't make an amendment, so I can only go by what council.
Okay.
She says it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on H2. Carries with Councillor Arneson opposed. And so now we move on to other business, and I'll put Councillor Kunst on. Councillor Kunst.
Thank you. So this notice of motion, I'll just explain. In World War II, the Allies fought together to free Europe from Nazi occupation. 1.1 million Canadians signed up from across this country, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to help liberate a people they didn't know. The Canadians had been given the monumental task of liberating Holland, and after many hard-fought battles, freedom finally came in May of 1945. My 90-year-old mother-in-law was a 16-year-old Dutch girl the day the Canadians came to Holland. It's a day it is seared in her memory and those of her generation. The parties in the streets lasted for weeks. The Dutch people have never forgotten the sacrifice of our men and women who fought for their freedom. School children to this day are commissioned to care for the many graves of the Canadian soldiers, and each spring the Dutch government sends 100,000 tulips to Ottawa to show their continued gratitude and as a sign of an unbroken friendship. An initiative called Liberation 75 is an opportunity for municipalities like the Township of Langley to partner with the embassies of Canada and the Netherlands to plant 1.1 million orange tulips to bloom across Canada next spring of 2020 in honor of the 1.1 million Canadian soldiers who fought in World War II approximately 75 years ago. So we are looking to obtain approximately 1,000 to 10,000 bulbs, depending on council support and community sponsorships. Part of the proceeds from the purchase of the bulbs will go to support the Canadian Legion. So I won't read all the whereas, just the therefore. Therefore, council directs staff to obtain Liberation 75 tulips, and that staff be directed that the tulip bulbs be planted at the Derrick Doubleday Arboretum in a dedication event to be organized in the fall of 2019 in order that the Liberation 75 tulips will bloom in the spring of 2020 in time for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands.
Moved by Councillor Kuhn, second by Councillor Richter. Discussion. Councillor Ferguson, did you want to discuss this or did you have other business? Okay, do you want to just maybe turn your... Okay, turn your... just maybe switch it off and we'll just stay with this motion, then I'll get you later. Councillor Long?
Well, I certainly appreciate the motion. I got some questions. I read the letter, so I guess we can only get 7,500 maximum, according to this, what I see here. So how many would we like to do? And I think we should probably amend it to make sure we have the funding, which would be council contingency, I would think. So there would, but I'm just wondering what kind of number you think would be appropriate. Is there some number that may correlate with something? I'm asking.
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out how many people are from BC that fought in Europe. So to sort of maybe match that, we couldn't actually get that number, but so we're sort of working on some of those details. I could also see like getting, going into the greater community, and I know I'm almost positive that I can get some support for this in the community. So the funding of it, I think I would like to see, council support it as well, because it just sends a strong message. But so I think it is to be determined. But, if council could provide some, a number that they're comfortable with, and then if we can actually purchase more. But there's an opportunity for people in the community to purchase their own, and the part of the initiative is actually that money goes to the part proceeds go to the Canadian Legion. So.
Okay. Well, I wonder if we should just buy 7,500 of them, and then we can give them out too if we don't need them all.
Yeah. I think what Councillor Long is getting at is just the funding for this. So 10,000 bulbs is what, $3,000.
We're allowed to buy 10,000 according to this.
No, I know. So 7,500 is 2,000. So we could have an amendment to this saying that that's a maximum $2,000. Council, from council contingency.
2,250 actually.
Okay. Okay. So we'll do that as an amendment to take a maximum of 2,250 from council contingency to fund this. Yeah. Will that be sufficient, Mr. Backen?
Well, what about
to purchase it? Then there's the labor,
stuff like that too.
Your worship, that would cover the bulb cost, but wouldn't necessarily cover the ceremonial costs or the, cost to plant them. A suggestion might be to just double the number and put it as an upset.
$5,000.
Yeah.
5,000.
Why don't we make $5,000?
Up to 5,000.
Up to $5,000 from council contingency. So if I can have that, I'll do it by unanimous consent. I'm going to say that word correctly one of these times. Unanimous consent. Got to wake up. Good. And so no opposition to that? Okay, so we'll add that as an amendment. And any further discussion? Councillor Richter?
No, I just wanted to say what a wonderful idea, and thanks very much, Councillor Kuntz, for bringing it forward. I had no idea.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to call the question on the tulip planting as amended. It carries unanimously. All right. Councillor Ferguson, you're quick on the draw.
Councillor Richter, we were hitting the buttons at the same time. Oh, I just wanted to rise on the fact that I want to reconsider a delegation request by Red Door Events. It was on the table earlier on when you weren't here, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to get a better understanding. So I'm going to ask for my motion to reconsider the vote on Red Door Events that was taken earlier on in this meeting.
Okay. So I just want to get some clarification from Ms. Bauer on the reconsideration in the same meeting by a member who votes in the, you have to help me on that one because it's...
The motion for reconsideration must be brought forward by a person who is on the prevailing side. So it would be someone who voted, just a sec, we voted...
It was defeated on a tie?
It was someone who voted against it.
Against it.
How about a motion to renewal?
So, I wasn't here for the vote, so Councillor Ferguson voted in the affirmative or in the negative? Affirmative. So our procedural bylaw also allows a member of council to bring back a reconsideration, but does have to be notice given. There is in a procedure bylaw the reconsideration for a member of council.
At a different meeting would have to be a notice given by the council member in an appropriate time.
Okay. So based on that ruling, Councillor Ferguson, I can't accept your motion. Okay. Yeah, sure. Councillor Long. Yeah.
So what about yourself? I mean, you weren't here. Is someone that wasn't here at all allowed to make the motion? Not that the mayor said he would, but
The mayor can, but I believe I still have to give some notice. Is that correct?
It is worded that someone who voted on the affirmative side, or the side against, sorry, and the mayor was not here for the vote, so the bylaw would be silent on that.
Under section. Okay.
call the chair then, would it? Be the call. It's up to you, big
So
boss.
just trying, under the community charter, I can bring back a motion for reconsideration. Does that need to have notice? Because I'm just going to try and find that section.
No, the only proviso of the charter would be that it's within the 30 days, I believe it is.
Right, yeah, so a motion to reconsider. Yeah. So it was a tie vote, and it has been my practice to bring back motions that are a tie vote if a member of council is missing. So it was a tie vote? What was the vote on it? I was told it was tie. I wasn't here, so.
No, it was a failed majority.
Was it failed?
2/3 we needed. We were one.
And they're coming next meeting.
Okay, so they're going to come next week.
It was a 5-3, your worship, so it would take a 6-3.
Okay, then I won't bring it back at this time. So I looked at the delegation, and they certainly have the opportunity to come back next meeting, and I don't think this council will make a decision based on one delegation without hearing from another, and so there's still time on this. So I won't bring it back. And I thought it was, I didn't quite understand it. Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have 3 items here. The first item is I've received correspondence from people who live in the area of Poppy High School with regards to the volume of traffic on 56th, and I know that that's happening because of all the backup on Highway 1, so a lot of that Highway 1 traffic is just running down 56 to Aldergrove. And therefore, the people who are queuing on 240th Street to turn left to get out onto 56 can't, because there's just a constant stream of traffic. So I believe they had sent a request last year for us to look at putting a traffic light in at 240th and 56. They didn't make the cut. But could we refer that request for a traffic light at 240th and 56 to the 2020 budget process?
Good. So that needs a motion, correct? Moved by Councillor Richter, seconded by Councillor Davis. I'll open that up. Discussion on that. Councillor Davis?
Yes, I can remember we did, and there was another one at 224th. Yeah, there was one at 224th. I don't want to take away that, but that's a real dangerous one because there's a hill. But we put 2 of them forth. But the one at 240th, 240th and 56. That's a humdinger. You can sit there for 20 minutes. It's I've done it a few times, and if there's anybody's impatient, it's no fun. But I totally support that to have a look at the budget. But I don't want to throw it off by let's put 224th on there again, because that's just as well. But so I'll leave it. I'll support 240th.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Just a quick question for staff. So this is for a traffic control signal, but would staff also look at a roundabout and just report back to that, or do we make a decision on traffic control signal without a staff report?
Signal or a roundabout.
I think you're simply referring it to the budget process, Your Worship. Okay. So that budget process can take into account either option, which is best for the intersection.
I just didn't want to be tied down to a traffic control signal. Councillor Long?
I guess I was curious if there's some development happening in that area. Would that not be possibly a condition of, because there are some lots there as part of tall timber, so I want to be careful, I guess, but if we refer it to budget, does that mean that the developer will never pay? If there were development, the developer would be excused from paying for that because the Township Council is going to pay for it anyway?
By referral to the budget, it simply means that it could be considered from either general revenue or DCCs, whatever the program may be. Of course, DCCs being funded by the developer. Works and services for a potential development could pick it up between now and that point. I think you're referring to a potential subdivision. The challenge is the subdivision is going to have a tough time only because of the lot sizes that are being suggested. So it may take several years for that to come forward.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question on that. I2. And it carries unanimously. Councillor Richter, I'll put you back on. Councillor Richter.
I just wanted to draw council's attention to, for any member of council that's going forward to UBCM this year, the City of Richmond has put forward a proposed UBCM resolution that I strongly oppose. I think it's very invasive into the private lives of council members. And their resolution is that, be it resolved that a statement of disclosure for municipal nominees and elected representatives be updated to additionally include a spouse's assets, a spouse's liabilities, and real property other than their primary residence, held singly or jointly by a spouse, child, brother, sister, mother, or father, to the best knowledge of the candidate. I just think that's terribly inappropriate. I mean, it's bad enough candidates have to disclose that. Now forcing candidates to get their families to disclose their holdings, that's not right.
Great, thank you.
So I would encourage anybody who's going to UBCM to vote against that one. The other thing I wanted just a quick question about, I see in the items on table today, item 12 on page 18, with regards to apparently a temporary storage of vehicle permit for a property on Fraser Highway, or a couple of properties on Fraser Highway, 23699 and 23737. And I'm just wondering, is that coming forward to us today? The complaint has come in from a business, a storage business across the street that has had to pay DCCs and pays property taxes, and querying why they're forced to have done this when these other properties that are zoned RU1 are getting away with cheap storage of recreational vehicles.
Mr. Mackin.
Mr. Seffi, it appears to be something in regards to a temporary use permit for storage that I don't think we're familiar with. Do you have any information at this time?
Yes, Mr. Richardson just reminded me that there's an application in process. It hasn't come to council yet, obviously, otherwise council would be aware of it. It's currently being reviewed by staff, and it's seeking to take advantage of a recent provision that's been built into the zoning bylaw called the temporary use provisions, that based on council direction or resolution could provide for temporary use of a property that is otherwise contrary to the zoning bylaw. And in this particular case, the applicant wishes to take advantage of that to provide for some parking, truck parking.
Okay, but this property has been doing this parking of recreational vehicles a lot longer than temporary. How long is a temporary permit?
It could be as long as 3 years, Your Worship.
Okay, well, that's not fair to properties that have gone through a rezoning process for the purposes of storing vehicles. So will staff be getting in touch with the person who wrote this letter, and will this application be coming to council for a vote?
The application will come to council at a future date, yes.
Okay, so will the letter writer be informed of the date it will be coming so that they can voice their concerns about it?
Depending on where the letter writer lives, it could either be part of the normal notification process, or if they're outside, subject to council direction, staff could actually notify them as well.
Okay, well, fair is fair. These guys that are complaining have done everything the right way, and the guys that are breaking the rules shouldn't be disadvantaging them, I don't think.
Okay, so we'll come back to council.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Richter. Councillor Long.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the last meeting, item M3, we discussed a letter, and I'm just trying to find the letter, from a youngster in Aldergrove regarding the intersection at 272nd and 29th, or 28th, I think it was. Anyway, and I was chairing the meeting, and of course there was discussion about referring this to staff to check with the school district, and it occurred to me later on, when we went to our meeting afterwards, that this actually came from the principal of Short Reed School. This is where the complaint originated. No, it may not have come to staff, but it certainly came to me from that principal. So I understand that they're checking with the school board. I don't know if they had a response yet or not. I just want to highlight that, and now that school's out anyway, I'd just like to see if we can make sure that this gets either in budget considerations or in time for the next school year, should we decide that a light be put in there. There were other discussions about the availability of power, what kind of light would be there, and the cost would be varying from $50,000 to maybe $250,000. Lots of questions asked, but I do recall that the principal contacted many of us about the issue from Short Reed School. Your Worship, Mr. Backen looks like he's dying to say something.
Just to confirm, Your Worship, that not know of the history, but the direction was to actually confer with the school district, who could then talk to the principal and their traffic people as well. So that process is underway, but we haven't heard anything back yet.
Okay, so just want to be sure that we get that before the school term starts, because if there is a need, which we believe there is, some of us believe there is, I think that needs to be in operation before school gets back if we so choose, and we'll have to find funding for it too if that's required.
Your Worship, we can certainly request that they respond before the school year begins, so that'll be up to them, though, as to the time of their response.
Okay, take that as direction. Thank you. Okay, we're good. Councillor Arneson?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I have a notice of motion.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll just read it out for next meeting. Whereas it is necessary and desirable to enhance library funding for the benefit of all current and future residents of the Township of Langley, and whereas Council is now in receipt of correspondence from other communities expressing support for the $20 million in 2020 library funding campaign, and whereas the provincial government's funding for public libraries has remained stagnant at $14 million for the past decade, whilst community demand for library services and rising costs continue to erode the delivery of our library service model. Therefore, be it resolved that the Langley Township Council write to the Honourable Rob Fleming, Minister of Education, requesting that the province of British Columbia restore funding for libraries to meet the current requirements by adding $6 million to the 2020 library budget. I so move.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business? Hold on, I got one thing. Just want to bring to Council's attention, you may have already seen some correspondence on this, but Railvolution is coming to Vancouver. And first time it's coming to Canada. It's a great conference regarding transit. Focuses on rail, but it's a good conference on transit. I went to it on behalf of Metro Vancouver to Denver a couple of years ago and found it very, very informative. So it's September 8th to 11th, and I encourage Council to, I know you got some documentation. If you have an opportunity to take in part of it or go to it, it's very enlightening. So just want to let you know. Now, no further business. Motion to terminate by Councillor Davis. Second. I have a seconder. Councillor Kunst. All those in favor. Opposed. Carried. Thank you.